Education Committee to order. Thank you for being here this morning. Today is Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. The time is 9 a.m. In attendance are Senator Hughes, Senator Costello, Senator Begich, and myself, Stevens. I expect Senator Coghill to join us when he can. We have a quorum to conduct business. Today we're going to be continuing our hearing on the sponsor substitute for Senate Bill 6, the Alaska Reads Act. This hearing is dedicated to public testimony on the bill. There is a CS that has been released for Senate Bill 6, and I'm hoping folks have had a chance to read it. We had a little trouble getting it to you, but it is available now. So I do expect considerable testimony today on this bill. So I'm going to ask folks to keep their comments to 3 minutes, if they will, in order to let everyone have an opportunity to speak. Any questions or comments before we begin our meeting? Senator Begich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of comments. One element of
Yes.
the CS, and then also just direct a little bit of information that I've seen over the last day and a half on the bill. So the first thing is just to remind people that in this bill, as in all versions of SB 6 and prior to that SB 99, the pre-K in the bill, and this is something Senator Coghill has brought up with me as well, but the pre-K element of the bill does not mandate pre-K, require pre-K for, require a parent to send their child to pre-K. That's always a voluntary decision. It's something that other senators on this committee have brought up in the past, and I've reassured them in the letter. The language in the bill is quite clear that it's not, it always remains the parent's choice to send a child to pre-K. The second thing I want to talk about is in relationship to the issue of if you currently are in the IDEA school or you homeschool your parents. Statute 1403.016 is a parent's right to direct the education of the parent's child. That statute, and it's available, and I can make copies or have copies made for folks, is quite clear that it recognizes, and this is section 1 of that statute, recognizes the authority of a parent, allows the parent to reject to and withdraw the child from a standards-based assessment or test required by the state. The bill does not mandate that a person who chooses to homeschool their parents would have to do the required tests or the screenings in this bill. There's clearly been some misinterpretation of that. The parents' rights were made paramount when we passed that statute some years ago. I believe it was in 2016, it might have been earlier, but those rights are not changed under this bill. And so I just wanted to correct those two elements of misinterpretation that are out there. I've had to write a few letters about that as well. But a third thing I wanted to point out was that in the bill there's a request that school districts provide to the department the ratio of the number of kids to teachers that are in a classroom. And the reason we're doing that is because it's our hope that we'll be able to gather good data from around the state. You may remember that one of the testifiers, Mr. Parker, had mentioned each of our districts had a particular class size ratio that was quite large. We know that that's an issue that's important to a number of people. We want to address the issue, but we need to address it with full evidence from the state, both rural and urban, so we know how class size is affecting things. So that will become, under this bill, that will become an element that's reported to the department, and then that will also be reported to us here in this committee and on the other body in their education committee as well. And I want to say in particular that Senator Hughes brought this to our attention, not just publicly in this committee, but has had private meetings with me as well to discuss this issue. I think it's really important for us to look at the class size issues and be sure that we are recognizing them. So I wanted to put those on the record, that it is our intent to gather the data necessary to make strong and decent decisions around how we address class size down the road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Begich. If I could comment on that, it's quite true. I've received several emails that homeschool folks, they need to understand that they always have that right to opt out. There's been some misunderstanding there. Yes, Senator Hughes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. And thank you, Senator Begich, for your comments. Because I know many educators and school administrators are listening and watching, I'd like to also say that I hope that districts across the state we all know that a smaller class size at these lower grades is going to be better and is going to allow the teachers to be more successful in implementing this. But I would encourage districts at this point, don't wait for the data. You already know in your gut that smaller classes are better. I would hope the districts would reconsider, the school boards would consider reprioritizing the funding to reduce the classroom ratio of students to the teaching staff. I think that is something that we're not going to mandate in this bill, but I think it's something that school boards and districts should be looking to do as much as possible, and the sooner the better.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. So we are probably going to be on a tight schedule. We want to get to everyone we can, but if we can't get to you, I want to remind you that you can submit written testimony at any time at senate.education@akleg.gov. So we'll try to limit this testimony to 3 minutes, get to everyone we can. If not, they'll realize there are other ways to contact us. So if we could then move to public testimony. We'll start with folks in the room and then move on to people online. Do we have an online list? Brief Eddies. We'll begin with Mary Beth Verheist, Anchorage School District. Mary Beth, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, please identify yourself and give your testimony, please.
Hey, good morning. My name is Mary Beth Verhelst, and I'm here today testifying today in support of the Alaska Reads Act. I applaud the state for taking action to ensure that all Alaska students learn to read well. My position currently is an instructional coach at the district level for ASD. However, I've been a primary teacher, specifically a kindergarten teacher, for most of those years. Between my two jobs, I have experienced the need for explicit teaching of the 5 essential areas of reading and having an assessment system in place to show the effectiveness of the instruction to ensure that all students reading proficiency. In working with teachers, it's apparent that there's a need to help support teachers with teaching the 5 areas of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Many teachers haven't had the training for how to teach explicitly the daily phonics lesson, which ensures an evidence-based reading curriculum so all students get a well-delivered phonics lesson daily to be a good reader, especially in kindergarten and first grade, where it is essential. Thank you again for your commitment to ensuring all students read well in Alaska. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Appreciate your comments. We'll go to Debbie Casey. I believe that's the right name. Debbie Casey here in the room from Ninilchik. Pleased to have you with us.
Thank you. It's actually Debbie Carey. I'm from
C-A-R-E-Y?
C-A-R-Y, no E.
C-A-R-Y, okay. Thank you, Debbie. Please go ahead.
I'm going to make this very quick. Our district is in support of the pre-K Senate Bill number 6. We like the way that it's moving. We understand that there will be changes in the future, but it's time to implement something across the state. So we do support this. I did have one question today, and that was on the section where we are reducing from September 1st to June 1st as far as when a student can enter kindergarten.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Carey, I'll ask, I think Senator Beckett is ready to respond to that.
Both I and I think Senator Hughes will respond to that. What it says is that right now the age determinant is September 1st. The date that you would enter wouldn't change. So let's say your school year starts October 1st, but you're 3 years old or 4 years old or 5 years old, and you don't turn that to the qualifying age until September 1st. We're pushing the qualifying age back to June 1. It's I think Senator Hughes can comment a little bit on developmental awareness of a child at that age. Right now, it would affect eight kids would have been affected in the state by that change, according to the data that we have from the department. So, Senator Hughes, did you want to comment on that?
Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's just to allow the children to be a little bit older when they enter, so you won't, and more prepared. One of the reasons, there are various reasons why, as you know, as an educator, that children may not be prepared, but one of them is just they need more time to mature. So it just allows a few more months. So for those teachers, the incoming set of students will have just a little advantage there that we think will be helpful to the teachers. And it'll, a lot of parents will actually these days hold boys, for instance, a whole year to allow them to mature and be more ready. So this is just adding a few months. So the set of students will be a little bit more mature.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Ms. Garrett.
Could I follow up with
Yes, please.
I believe there'd probably be more than 8 students that would be affected. Any student that was born from June 1st to September 1st wouldn't be entering kindergarten until they were actually almost 6. That's my understanding.
Senator Begich, you comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I guess the department was where we got the data point on that at present it would affect 8 current students that are in statewide kindergarten. But if that's incorrect, I'd want to hear from the department on that.
Yes.
May I comment? I think that data, and Deed can correct if it's wrong, was on October, was it 1st? October 1st, there were 8 students who still were not that age. Perhaps they'd been brought in early. But the point is basically to allow children to mature more. And I do think it definitely be all the children that are born between June and September would be waiting. So in August, a lot of schools begin in August. It sounds like my mic maybe went out. There are 4-year-olds entering kindergarten because their birthdays aren't until, and yes, so you have 4-year-olds starting. So this way we would know that all the students would be 5 when they started kindergarten.
Thank you. And further questions, I can direct you to the department to get some specifics on that. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks so much. We'll move on to Dr. Jennifer Knutson, Anchorage School District. Dr. Knutson.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jennifer Knudsen, Senior Director of Teaching and Learning in the Anchorage School District. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. The Alaska Reads Bill provides the direction and support for reading growth for each student to really ensure that all of our Alaska students are proficient readers by 3rd grade. I have had the opportunity to work in 2 Title I schools in Anchorage who were part of the Reading First initiative in the early mid-2000s. And through that grant, we implemented many of the same evidence-based practices that are in this bill. And that includes a core curriculum that addresses those 5 essential areas of reading, universal reading and screening, targeted and intensive reading interventions, and progress monitoring. And we implemented reading instruction, and what we now refer to, and what you refer to in the bill, is response to instruction or multi-tiered systems of support. And what I want to share is during that time, our 3rd graders increased from 28% proficient or higher on our state assessment in 2001 to 85% proficient or higher in reading in 2006. So we saw significant results with this model in Title I schools. And what we know is reading is the one content area where we have a convergence of evidence about how students learn and how to best teach. And given the higher standards we have now in 2020, it's even more critical that we have this reading instruction, early reading instruction for all students in Alaska so that they can access advanced classes and really experience the joy of reading as they get older. So as both a parent and a district administrator, I'm in support of this bill, and I want to thank you for your work on it and look forward to how it evolves over time.
Thank you, Dr. Knudsen. I appreciate you giving us those very specific information. on the improvement in their students' reading skills. We'll move to Stacy Elbert, who is in Anchorage, LIO. Stacy, can you hear me? Stacy Elbert. Okay, we'll come back to Stacy then. Let's move on to Judy Elledge. Judy Elledge in Anchorage. Can you hear me, Judy?
Is Anchorage still on?
Okay. Well,
Can you hear me?
yes, Judy, go ahead. Is this Judy speaking? Okay, then let's go on to Christine Villano from Fairbanks. Miss Villano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Senator. Thank you. My name, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly. Please go ahead.
My name is Christine Villano, and I live in Fairbanks, Alaska. I've been an Alaskan teacher for many years. I have a Bachelor's of Education from UAF and an MS plus 80 credits from Western Oregon University. My trainings and courses have focused on reading, writing, and STEAM education. I've taught reading and writing in the inner city of Newark, New Jersey, in the Yupik village of St. Mary's, Alaska, and have been a first grade teacher in Fairbanks for more than 45 years. My professional life has been focused on teaching reading and writing. There are many components of the bill that I like. Pre-K programs for all Alaskan children, the focus on reading practices, the connection with parents, and early reading interventions. My concern is how we will adequately fund this bill so it is not just an unfunded mandate. Early primary teachers often face large class sizes and will be hard-pressed to do all the extra components that the bill would require due to the lack of time and the numbers in the classroom. I'm encouraged by the state's interest in reading, but I'm concerned about the prescriptive nature of the bill. Basic skills are important, but they're only a part of a balanced reading program. The bill definitely needs teacher voice throughout the process, from the selection of supplemental materials, assessment tools, professional development, the retention policies, and how the program will be implemented. I truly believe we who have been in the classrooms of Alaska at the ground level have much to offer the legislature on reading instruction, progress monitoring, interventions, and assessment. Teachers need to be part of the process of how the legislation evolves and what it will look like in the future. Teacher buy-in and motivation happens when we're part of the process and the implementation. One-size-fits-all reading program do not work. Educators need to be able to differentiate and personalize for the students. All reading instruction should be culturally relevant and developmentally appropriate. Issues of English language learners and English as a second language learners must be addressed. And one thing that really I'm passionate about is class size matters. The bill talks about small group instruction, intervention, frequent assessments, frequent reporting out to parents on interventions which are used. And this is all best practices. But there have been times where I have taught up to 31 first graders. It's so difficult to reach the needs of all my kids in such a difficult and stressful situation. When the students are crammed in a sardine can, which I often felt I was, it's hard to teach, manage classroom behavior, and reach out regularly to all parents. When the class sizes are smaller, the quality of reading instruction is much more successful. when smaller classes are in our school supported by our state, I have been more successful, and student learning and achievement are enhanced, and it's a less stressful environment for the children. I want this bill to succeed because I want our Alaskan kids to succeed. And with just a couple of modifications, it could benefit Alaska students. I want to thank you for your service and for working with educators to help students get the best possible start in pre-K and early primary. And I also want to thank Senator Begich for meeting with groups of teachers to get their input on the bill. And I want you to feel free to use my expertise and resource as an expert in reading and education, as well as many of my colleagues. And I want to thank you for my chance to testify this morning.
Thank you, Christine, and for your years of service to the students in Fairbanks. We'll move on to Judy Elledge, and I'd ask the next person to be ready to speak, which is Stacy Elbert from Anchorage. So let's go to Judy first and then to Stacy. Judy, are you with us?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Stevens, the committee members, for this opportunity once again to testify on behalf of SB 6 and the urgency of its passage. As many of you know, I've been an educator since 1981, and since 1997 I've lived and worked in rural Alaska, and since 2003 I have worked in the lowest performing schools in the state of Alaska. As my time as a teacher, principal, curriculum director, a testing coordinator, and a state coach, and my new job as a state new literacy coordinator, it's my hope these experiences will help me guide in these needed changes. I want to commend all the wonderful teachers that I know and have worked with through the years. And there are many reasons where we are today, but I want everyone to know that that blame does not lie only on teachers, as we often are blamed, but on parents, districts, and local school boards, not just teachers. Just passing laws will not make it happen without total commitment from all the stakeholders. I'm calling today because I did view all the changes that were made yesterday in the committee, and there is one section I would like to offer changes in wordings. I believe there may not have been prior knowledge of what already exists, and it is item 17 where it states, require consideration of the recommendation from the 2018-19 Task Force on Reading Proficiency and Dyslexia. I wanted everyone to know that the reference to this task force is mentioned in several statewide documents currently being used for literacy in the state. The DEED's Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, the $21 million received in October 2019, includes state activities related to the approval of a state literacy plan and an update to the Alaska Reading Blueprint. These tasks are already underway as part of grant activities. The state literacy the draft state literacy plan includes the 2018-19 Task Force Reading Proficiency and Dyslexia report in it, along with other evidence-based interventions. In fact, under this plan, evidence-based resources, the task force mentioned is reported as the number one evidence-based resource. This report was read in full and included in this plan. It is also listed as number 4 under references for the state plan. So after consultation with the department, I would like to recommend a change to section 17 wording to better represent what is already happening in the state and to understand that all reading deficiencies are not dyslexia related. This would broaden and make language consistent for all students with reading difficulties, and I will send this wording to the chair. The wording would state, current DEED efforts include state activities related to the approval of a state literacy plan and an update to the Alaska Reading Blueprint, which includes recommendations from the 2018-19 Task Force on Reading Proficiency and Dyslexia and other evidence-based reports that define screenings or assessment tools that meets the needs of all students. We just feel that wording would better include all of the efforts that are going forward, not just this one task force. So I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you so much, Judy. I appreciate your comments and appreciate your following through on this legislation right from the beginning. We'll move on to Stacy Ebert, and pleased to follow that, if you'd be ready, would be David Neese. So, Stacy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please go ahead. If you identify yourself.
My name is Stacy Eibert, last name Eibert, E-I-B-E-R-T. Esteemed representatives and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to comment on SB 6, or the Alaska Reads Act. It's wonderful to live in a state that values the opinions of its populace. Our common ground is that we know the importance of our children. These small bundles of potential will one day be our leaders, explorers, inventors, problem solvers, and, most critically, the individuals taking care of us at the nursing home. It's obvious that everyone wants what's best for the students of Alaska. The failure of the current educational model is that it's based off of the 20th century response to the Industrial Revolution. Factories were cropping up everywhere, and workers with a common set of both skills and knowledge were required to run them. This one-size-fits-all methodology made sense for its time. However, it's now the 21st century. The digital revolution shrank the globe, and we must, as both Alaskans and Americans, adapt accordingly. One-size-fits-all just won't cut it any longer. Examples of modern, successful education are easy to find. In Finland, all elementary-age students have the same teacher until grade 7. They learn the strengths and weaknesses of each child to shore up learning gaps. Therefore, the vast majority of students are at the same level by high school. They have only one standardized test that's administered at age 16. Japan is another global academic powerhouse. Before their children are taught to read, they do in-school vision exercises to make sure eye muscles are strong for prolonged visual tracking. They don't test until age 12. Other strong contenders are Canada, Estonia, China, Hong Kong, and South Korea. While their cultures are different, they share many goals: quality teachers, tracks for either vocational school or college, and standardized testing happening later rather than sooner. The dangers of continuing down a one-size-fits-all path is evident. Alaska will slip even further down. The 21st century workforce must be able to collaborate, adapt, and problem solve. No one-size-fits-all test can measure these intelligences. Critical thinking skills are forged in a facilitative classroom environment where the individuality of each student is nurtured. In conclusion, the Alaska Reads Act is right in its heart, but wrong in its methodology. Please don't pass it. We all want our students to achieve more, but this is going about it in the archaic way. Look at what's happening at the top-performing countries and emulate what they're doing. If you do, the last frontier will be the first leader in education nationally and perhaps one day the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy Eibert. Appreciate your comments. We'll move on to David Neese, to be followed by Chris Rattan. David?
Yeah, hey, this is David Neese. I'm speaking for myself. I hope the committee can hear me.
Yes, clearly.
All right. As a member of the House Educational Task Force in 2014, we looked at the way the state of Alaska delegates its, specifically the legislature delegates its authority to local school districts and opts for local control. And what we've had is a swing in the methodology of reading delivery over the years. And I think it's important to look at the fact that it's even admitted by the Board of Education statewide, and that we're not getting what we're supposed to out of reading. And in Anchorage, we had about 3,400 third graders take the PEAKS test in 2019. 2,063 of them were not proficient in English language arts. Fairbanks North Star Borough, about 1,000 third graders, 600 of which are not proficient. In the Kenai Borough, you had 580 third graders, 326 are not proficient. In the Juneau Borough School District, 300 third graders, 186 are not proficient. Now, those kids, this bill does not help. They're already in fourth grade. So delaying any implementation to this year would again send several thousand children on to fourth grade that have not had any kind of intervention, that have not been able to prove that they can do English language arts. ASD does AIMS assessment. It knows where kids are at reading. It has a policy that allows districts to promote children. They've kind of moved away from social promotion. But I'd like to remind the members of the committee, reading's a fundamental thing And even President Obama pointed out that, you can't have any kind of issue where you're not focused on this. And so to quote him, I'm going to say, in Chicago, we went through this argument at the time. It was very controversial, but in retrospect seems obvious, which is ending the practice of social promotion. This notion that we should just graduate kids because they've reached a certain age and we don't want to embarrass them, despite the fact that they may not be able to read, that's a disservice to students and that's a disservice to parents. Nothing's changed. That was in 2009. So we've got 10 years worth of kids that have been, a majority of which have been promoted, that are having difficulties. The Title I schools have additional resources. They have some of them pre-K. Nothing seems to be working. So it's very important that this bill get passed through so you can see if you can get results out of it. So fully support this bill as written, and that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dees. Appreciate your comments. We'll move on to Chris Rattan from Craig, to be followed by Sean Arnold from Valdez. Mr. Rattan.
Good morning, Senate Education Committee. This is Chris Rattan. I'm the superintendent with Craig City School District. And I want to speak to two sections of the bill. And well, number one, I want to thank the committee for the improvements that have been made based on previous testimony. It's obvious that you're listening and you're trying to craft the most equitable bill for all Alaskans. I would like to draw your attention to the most recent addition, page 13, which is section 14.30.760, statewide assessments, particularly in how that the department will adopt a statewide screening or assessment tool to administer in grades K through 3 times per year. Craig City School District also operates a statewide homeschool program, PACE. We have students who are all over the state, and particularly in southeast Alaska and a number of remote areas. And we just have some concerns. We're not sure how this bill as currently written will intersect with our homeschool parents and families in regards to having three assessments per year, especially when they're living in remote areas. In line with that, on page 14, section 14.30.765, the reading intervention services, which states that it'll offer intensive reading intervention services to students in grades kindergarten through 3 who exhibit a reading deficiency and to assess students to achieve reading proficiency. I'm also concerned in regards to our homeschool program, especially for those families who are in remote areas, how we might provide those services in an equitable fashion. In line with that, too, in regards to having an on-site reading intervention instructor, I'm concerned that we won't be able to find statewide that many providers of these services who are well educated to provide the services to our schools and our districts. We are in a difficult hiring time in this state where we're not getting enough candidates for the positions that are available. I'm not saying that we don't move forward with this, but I think it might put some of our school districts, particularly in the more remote areas, in a difficult position finding people to provide these services. With that, I will end my testimony, and once again, I want to thank the committee for the improvements that have been made to date, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide more insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rattan. I appreciate your comments from Craig. Moving on to Sean Arnold in Valdez, we followed by Mary Kretschmar in Anchorage. Sean, are you with us?
I am.
Please identify yourself for the record.
I am here. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you'd identify yourself for the record, Mr. Arnold.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on SB 6, the Alaska Reads Act. For the record, I'm Sean Arnold. I'm a superintendent of Valdez City Schools. I also serve as the president of the Alaska Superintendents Association. So let me start by saying I'm optimistic about many components of this bill, including reliable funding for early education programs and an increased focus on reading proficiency by 3rd grade. I believe these two pillars are critical to ensure all Alaskan students are adequately prepared to lead fulfilling and successful lives. These are game changers for our students. Much of the previous testimony has touched on a similar question. Why is there a difference between our students' abilities and students from other states? Like others, I know our students and teachers are just as capable and dedicated. This bill addresses part of that why. By establishing statewide early education programs, we are supporting children through a critical development time period, better preparing them to be successful students when they enter first grade. Further initiatives to provide evidence-based instruction and interventions will only strengthen the progress made through these early learning initiatives. However, there are components, pieces of a larger pie, as Dr. Parody testified last week. This reading bill will not reach its full potential unless accompanied by other changes in education in Alaska. Teacher and principal turnover, social and emotional mental health needs of our students, and historical trauma continue to have significant impacts on students' abilities and outcomes. Any new program, curriculum, or intervention will be undermined by the realities and practicalities of the learning conditions across Alaska. As we continue forward with this bill, we must not forget these pieces. Just as the science is clear on effective ways to teach students to read, so is the research on the retention of students. To be clear, I and my colleagues across Alaska do not fear retention or accountability, as have been suggested, but rather know that it can hurt kids. Research has overwhelmingly shown that retention has a negative impact on students. Recent attempts to obscure these facts with specific focus on Florida's results can be misleading. The studies in Florida provide no definitive data on the pure effects of retention on student outcomes. As a state, we shouldn't be reinforcing a questionable practice. Instead, we should focus on providing our students with the most effective instruction and interventions we can. As we travel down this road, which is not new, and we've been here before, bumps and dust remind us that we must slow down and exercise caution. If we don't stop to consider the potential obstacles ahead, we risk causing an accident. Building a road is difficult, especially in a state as big and diverse as Alaska. Increased feedback from educators on critical parts of this bill will ensure all of our students arrive safely. I do want to clear up a misrepresentation. Commissioner Johnson asked superintendents for general input about reading early in this process, and we responded immediately that we were ready to help craft the bill and give meaningful input. We asked repeatedly for him to share what he and the governor was thinking, even conceptually, and we were never given any opportunity until Senator Begich gave us the bill after it was introduced. So any notion that superintendents were at the table in this process was false. The bill had very limited input from educators in Alaska. The bill is a good start, and with us working together moving forward, we can craft a bill that's good for all of our students. So thank you for your service, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Arnold. Appreciate your thoughts. I'm pleased to have with us Senator Coghill. We'll move on to Mary Kretschmer. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, to be followed by Rhonda Schumbaum. Mary, are you with us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Stevens, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you clearly, Mary. Would you pronounce your last name so I'd get it right here?
Yes. Yes. For the record, my name is Mary Kretschmar, Kretzschmar, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Coding Dyslexia Alaska parent-led movement to advocate for dyslexia. Thank you, Senator Stevens, for having public testimony, and I also wish to thank Senator Stevens, Senator Begich, and the other committee chairs for their continued support of quality education for Alaska's children. I'd specifically like to address item 7 on the forthcoming changes to SB 6. And I would highly promote not deleting the important language as relates to the number of students within a district being retained from advancing to the next grade. We want reporting and accountability to be transparent. Parents need to be able to access information through their districts. We have local control. Parents can't always navigate through the state's database, but they can go to their local school and ask for the information. If the districts are required to report it, then it will be more accessible. This way it'll be transparent. Maybe even the information there should be a public notice requirement to report this information for the local district's accountability to provide quality education on an ongoing basis. We like to support the bill. We think the Alaska Reads Act is very important, and it's vital that it be crafted with strong language to hold everyone accountable. We cannot lose sight of the goal to have children reading proficiently. Thank you very much, and I appreciate, again, all the efforts being made to make sure this is a strong bill that will make changes here in Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. We'll move on to Rhonda in just a minute, to be followed by Scott McManus. Senator Begich, do you have a clarification?
Just a quick clarification. The reporting would still have to happen from districts to the department and to this committee, and she makes a very good point about the ability for parents to access the information, but I wanted to be sure that she knew we weren't eliminating the reporting of the information at all. We were just saying at the request of some districts we would not put it on the website, but she makes a very good point, and that information should be shared with a parent who's interested by a district.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Moving on to Rhonda Schlumbond, to be followed by Scott McManus. Rhonda.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hear you clearly. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for taking public testimony for the Alaska Reads Act. My name is Rhonda Schlumbaum. I've been a teacher for 30 years, with 22 of those in Alaska at Salcha Elementary. I hold a Master's of Education degree and a reading endorsement. I applaud your work on pre-K and moving the date for the entrance into kindergarten. I also believe putting a reading teacher in the schools that are most struggling is a start. SB 6 has a couple of shortcomings. One is that by changing the language of the bill to only reading, you are neglecting writing. Writing is how many children access print. It is through writing that they understand how language is put together and brings the whole concept full circle. Children need to understand that what they write down is spoken, can be read, and listened to. I would urge you to think about this to make this bill stronger and not more narrow. The second shortcoming of SB 6 is that it only mentions dyslexia, and that we know that there are other reading deficiencies in our classroom. I suggest using language that supports all of our struggling readers. Research tells us that time on print is the most beneficial way to help children learn to read. We must make it balanced and engaging. Teachers know that in a balanced classroom, we must teach phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We also know that the National Reading Panel included all 5, so that we must be cognizant to make sure that vocabulary and comprehension are not neglected. Reading is, after all, comprehension. I also would add that those struggling readers must receive extra reading outside their core instruction. Another concern I have with this bill is putting so much emphasis on screeners. Children vary during testing. They may show you that they know a letter or sound one day and not the next. Why? Because they haven't committed to long-term memory need more experiences to create this neural pathway. From experience, I also know that when kids take assessments on computers, being technically savvy is part of this skill. Young second graders have to read from a screen, scroll, and choose the best answer. If a child doesn't want to complete these tests, they click right through them. Has the committee thought about what to do then? Would it be accurate to say that this children doesn't know how to read or just doesn't want to do a test? Finally, the bill may help with class size. We know that teachers who have 27 students in their classroom cannot adequately respond to all their needs. One of my colleagues said that teaching is hard, even for veteran teachers. But the biggest issue why children struggle to learn to read is poverty. Poverty affects Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the number of books in the home, and therefore the number of words a child is exposed to. Adding pre-K is a start, but it doesn't address children of trauma, coping with challenging behaviors, and making sure that all our kids are ready to learn. I've written letters to the committee with research links that are in the public record, and I'm always open to talk about this because teaching is my passion and my life's work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate your many years of dedication to the students of Alaska. Move on to Scott McManus from Tok, and to be followed by Esther Pepin from King Salmon. Mr. McManus.
Good morning, Senate Education Committee. My name is Scott McManus. I'm the superintendent of Alaska Gateway School District. There are many good things about SB 6, the Alaska Reads Act, and I'd like to personally thank Senator Begich for his passionate work for the students of Alaska. The intent is to get our children up to reading at level by the third grade, which is something that has been a specific and stated goal of my school district for the past 5 years, and we are making progress toward that. We use AIMSweb as our screener. We use a blended instructional model that incorporates the findings of the National Reading Panel that are all spelled out in the Act with the interventions based on Orton-Gillingham. We train our teachers on vision-related learning issues such as dyslexia. Our teachers and aides have all received training on these instructional programs. In the past 4 years, we've made significant gains in reading in our elementary population as measured by MAP and Lexia because of the focus on reading. In several classrooms, we've seen reading improvement that was full grade level improvement over the regular growth curve in our district, and I've also seen our students actually lose ground when they're in the hands of a poor teacher, and those teachers are quickly replaced as soon as possible. I hear so much that that nothing's happening, and I can tell you that a lot is happening. There's much to like in this bill, in particular the honorable intent of most of the sponsors, which is to make sure our kids can read and function literally in a society that requires it. I like that the bill supports our pre-K, supports parent engagement, provides support from the department to train staff, and that it based its findings on the National Reading Panel. But there are other aspects that cause me to raise serious flags. The one-size-fits-all approach, the loss of local control, the significant reporting mandates that will require increased clerical and instructional staff, the emphasis on centralized control from the department, which is really, I think it's going to crush this. It's going to crush this idea. And maybe most importantly, with the availability of qualified staff, which has been a serious problem for all of us. I've had a reading interventionist advertised for 2 years. We got one up here for 1 semester before they got on a plane and went back to the States. I want to see how that's going to be addressed. What I'd like to see is a bill that focuses on student growth, that takes into account where many of our kids are starting from. I'd suggest a menu of screeners for the district to select from that the department can approve, but that we can have some options with. I'd like to see a training program that starts out at the university that's available broadly to teachers and to our aides who are really critical in long-term change. And I'd like to see a phased-in implementation that gives the Department of Education and the school districts time to spool this up. Resolving this is a function of available resources. Districts are already being tasked with doing more and more, and I crunched some numbers this morning based on the 0.5 FTE and that we would get. So my district would get about $144,000 extra. I crunched how much I think it would cost us to implement the bill as implemented, and I estimate right now, this is a quick estimate, about $400,000. So there's $250,000 out of the district coffers, and that's going to be, we're going to have to figure out where that's going to come from. I support the intent and much of the content of SB 6, and I hope that more input from educators across the state is taken, more input from my colleagues before this bill is finalized. We've made a lot of growth. I don't want to lose those gains. I do want to see this bill implemented in a way that will be effective in rural Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent McManus. Moving on to Esther Pepin from King Salmon, to be followed by Don Lester from Eagle River. Ms. Pepin. Can you hear me, Esther? Yes, please speak up, Esther.
Sorry, thank you. Good morning. My name is Esther Pepin from King Salmon, Bristol Bay. Thank you for your openness to consider how the state can best support reading and young children, and for this opportunity to provide public testimony. I am the Early Learning Coordinator at Bristol Bay Borough School District, a mother of a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old, and a member of the Bristol Bay Borough community. And I would like to speak in support of funding for preschool that this bill proposes. Having public funding available for preschool will allow schools to build relationships early on with families. During pivotal developmental years, we need to be having conversations with parents about important milestones in children's development on a local level. Learning to read is so often affected by children's social emotional development and pre-literacy skills. Having funding during the preschool years will support districts' efforts to begin this work during the highest developmental years before school starts. If districts are to develop a strategic response to instruction and reading intervention in kindergarten through third grade, we must stop to consider the necessary role that preschool plays in the development of phonological awareness, one of the 5 components of learning to read, and how these preschools can be funded and supported. Specifically, I'd like to speak a little bit about our experience with support from the state. We've been a recipient of the pre-elementary grant for the past 4 years, and we have been able to provide preschool for every 3- and 4-year-old in our community. So having funding for preschool has ensured our young children are ready for kindergarten. The Alaska Developmental Profile annually measures 13 goals that are significant predictors of students' future success in schools. Before we received pre-elementary funding, our students averaged between 25 and 35% fully ready for kindergarten. And in the 4 years we've received funding from the state through the pre-elementary grant, our students are now 67 to 100% fully ready for kindergarten. While this data is just reflective of a few years, with your support through this bill, we hope that this readiness will continue and we'll have more data to begin comparing against kindergarten readiness and third grade reading scores. Having a high-quality preschool program is a challenge for districts to collaborate with each other's families, elders, and community partners to develop a model of continuity of care. Continuity of care between school and home. Preschool is an important transitional year. Continuity of care between the birth through 5-year-old spectrum, and then also the K through third grade, ensuring that preschool is not a silo learning experience, but that it can transition between those 2 age spans. And then continuity of care between the Alaska Native ways of knowing and Western education system. As a mother who will be having a child again in preschool next year, I hope that we will have access to support his needs and that he will have a rich environment to socialize, develop problem-solving skills, collaboration skills, and play with other children as he begins his educational career and life. So please hear my concern as a representative of my community and the school district, and I'm available to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Esther. Really appreciate your comments. We'll move on to Don Liston, to be followed by Posey Boggs. Just a comment before we do that. We have a hard ending here at 10:25 because of a floor session. So if we can't get to everyone, please be aware that you can send written comments to senate.education@aklag.gov. Hopefully we'll get through all of the comments, folks that are lined up here. But if not, please reach us by writing. So Don Liston, are you with us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator Stevens and members of the board. My name is Don Liston. I hold a master's degree of education from the University of Alaska Southeast. I've been a certified teacher since 2003. Between 2007 and 2017, I taught adult basic education at the Mountain View Community Center in Anchorage for 5 years and at the Wasilla Job Center for 4 years. In 2013, my ABE students nominated me, and I was selected as a BP Teacher of Excellence. An estimated 25% of Alaska kindergarten students do not graduate high school, and poor reading skills is a primary reason. We've practiced bad teaching schemes like Whole Word and others which require the memorization of words instead of teaching phonics. Many of my ABE students required the learning of phonics in order to learn how to read. And once they overcame the poor reading methods they were previously taught, my students quickly picked up the skill. In addition to reading, the GED test requires the writing of an essay. I had as many as 75 to 100 students attending as they were able in my classes. They included young and old Alaskans requiring a GED so they could get into our economy. I saw no evidence that any early pre-K programs impacted their potential for success, and our Constitution calls for the state providing education from the age of 7. We have reading specialists throughout the state. Students learn to read when they're motivated and have a capable teacher. I encourage team learning in my classes, and my students were successful, including many students who had previously had individual education plans. And they were special ed, but when they came into my class, we didn't call anybody special ed. In general, I support any effort to assure Alaskans can read at an early age, and I thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much, Don. Congratulations on being a teacher of excellence. We'll move on to Posey Boggs, to be followed by Mavet Obadiah. Posey, are you with us?
Yes, hi. This is Posey Boggs, and I'm testifying for the Alaska Reading Coalition. Senator Stevens and members of the Senate Education Committee, thank you for taking public testimony on this version of SB 6. We're excited to see a lot of the things that have been done to strengthen the bill. For example, simply by using the word reading, strengthen and focuses the bill on reading and not the whole of education. And in a pre-K bill, it's very important to define appropriate pre-reading skills that should be assessed in preschool and then can be directly taught in preschool in very engaging and fun ways that are not drill and kill or anything like that. But it definitely will help. And having that same sort of language continue into the K-3 classrooms and follow through is very, very important. Real happy that there's a commentary period by a panel of stakeholders on the efficacy of the Reading Act. I think feedback during the pathway, the timeline is very excellent. And the defining of the terms is very critical. Evidence-based reading intervention, reading specialists, having it in statutes means there's less opportunity to be loose with the language and regulations. Regarding reading, we need bunches and bunches of highly knowledgeable and skilled teachers of reading in Alaska's classrooms. How are we going to get there? Dr. Stephen Atwater says that UA's initial licensure programs are already producing this level of reading teachers, but I want to know, how do we verify that? The University of Alaska needs beginning teachers when they graduate to have fluent reading instructional skills. And we need to grow our current teachers into reading specialists. One way to be sure that the University of Alaska is producing very fluent reading teachers is to have the university administer a standalone reading competency exam similar to those used in Massachusetts, Colorado, Arkansas, Connecticut, and other states, with solely the purpose of self-reflecting as a college of education. Are you producing what is needed to teach reading? And the results should be reported to the legislature as a point of information. It may be that a different approach to ensuring and providing education and information to our teachers would be to think out of the box. The legislature created the ICER by funding quite a few years ago, I think in the 1960s. The legislature could fund a multidisciplinary Institute of Reading Excellence just like they created ICER.
Posey, excuse me for interrupting, but we have quite a tough schedule here. I'd ask you if you could conclude your comments, please.
Okay, having more flexibility in providing education to a variety of paraprofessionals, professional development, principals, and volunteers may give us much more flexibility to provide remote communities and those with high turnover, highly knowledgeable and trained teachers. And thank you very much. I'll stay online should there be questions.
Thank you, Posey. I appreciate your following this bill right from the beginning. I have to change the rules here. We have a tough schedule to get to the floor here. I'm going to have to change the time to 2 minutes, and if you please follow that closely if you can. Otherwise, we'll simply not get through everyone who is lined up to speak. And remind you that any written comments would be greatly appreciated at senate.education@akleg.gov. Moving on to Mavet Obadiah to be followed by Jody Taylor. Mavet, if you would, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, my name is Marvet Obady, and I'm here today in support of the Alaska Reads Act. As a parent of a 4-year-old and educator, I want to say thank you to the state of Alaska for taking action to ensure all of our children learn to read. As a former classroom teacher, English language learners teacher, and now an English language learners coach with the Anchorage School District, there is not only a need to help students decode, but to ensure that students are in school environments that are rich in vocabulary and supports language acquisition, which are both essential components to build language and becoming a skilled reader. We are the voice and advocates for our students and parents that don't have a voice. Those parents trust our education system to ensure that children are successful in schools and in their academic career. This bill would support just that. Thank you again for your advocacy and commitment to our students and allowing me the opportunity to testify in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Obadiah. Moving on to Jody Taylor and then Abby Hensley. And again, if you keep your comments to 2 minutes, I'd greatly appreciate it. Jody.
Hi, thank you so much for considering this bill. I hope that it's something you'll move forward with. My name is Jody Taylor. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, and I'm joined with my friend Celeste Rowden Hodge, who's on the board for NAACP. We highly encourage you to support and follow through with this bill. Our students in Alaska need a very focused look at reading, especially early reading, so that they can be successful throughout the duration of their school career. There's a lot of data that shows and supports when they learn to be proficient readers by 3rd grade, they're successful throughout the rest of their academic career. If they do not get this by 3rd grade, they are unsuccessful. And I have personally seen that in an ACT camp that I help administered. When you don't get children to be successful in school, they're not going to all of a sudden become successful later in their career, and they miss out on being the full person that they could be. The second issue I'd like to address is the retention portion of this bill. I strongly encourage that so that our students have outcome-driven results. As a parent who's held a student back, that was extremely beneficial for my daughter to have a second year in her 1st grade and make sure she was ready to go and successfully launch throughout the rest of her education career. In addition, I think it helps all of the students that there's an accountability portion of this bill that will help students throughout Alaska. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Appreciate your comments. Moving on to Abby Hensley, who's calling from Sacramento, and Brad Galbraith to follow from Phoenix. Abby Hensley, good to have you with us, Abby. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Stevens and members of the committee. I'm Abby Hensley. I'm Executive Director for Best Beginnings, which is a statewide effort, although I live in Anchorage. There's a quote from an award-winning children's author, Emily Buchwald, that says, "Children are made readers on the laps of their parents." And that really says so beautifully and clearly why I do what I do every day. So we all want Alaska children to be able to read well by the time they leave 3rd grade. We know what a big difference that can make in children's whole lives. We're watching with great interest the evolution of SB 6. We're excited to see support for more state-funded preschool opportunities for young children, a designated home for parents as teachers, and a detailed plan to ensure Alaska children learn to read by 3rd grade. As you continue your deliberations and as other colleagues weigh in, I encourage you to consider the recommendations that were made by the National Governors Association in their publication, Governor's Pocket Guide to Early Literacy. There are 5 action steps that they include there, and 4 of them I think are pretty well included in the bill. But there's a 5th one that I think we need to think about. And not that I'm asking that anything be added to this bill for children birth to age 5, but just to keep this in mind. So their fifth action step says, engage and support families as partners in early language and literacy development. Invest in programs that increase families' capacity to build their children's language and literacy skills. For example, home visiting, public-private partnerships to promote parent-child book reading and build home libraries. Early literacy campaigns focused on families. Well, I was very happy to see that this particular list includes and has a focus on what families can do themselves at home to help ensure that their children are prepared to learn to read. Frankly, it also describes the work of Best Beginnings and our Imagination Library partners across the state. And Senator Stevens, I wanted to be sure that you know that there's a new Imagination Library just starting up in Ketchikan. So as you continue to hone the Alaska Reads Act, please keep in mind that getting ready to read does not start when a child turns 4 and attends preschool. Along with other organizations and individuals, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that parents read to their children beginning at birth, such as Senator Hughes's family did in reading to her grandson. So I just want to leave you with this quote again, and thank you for your work in this important area. Children are made readers on the laps of their parents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abby. Always great to hear from you. Brad Galbraith to be followed by Roy Getchell. Mr. Galbraith. Can you hear me, Mr. Galbraith, calling in from Phoenix?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please, go ahead. Put your name on the record, if you would, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Brad Galbraith. I represent Excel and Ed in Action. We're a national nonprofit that works on student-centered policy across the country. And we've worked on several reading acts throughout the country, and through that process, we've identified 14 fundamental principles that make a successful reading act, and we are extremely encouraged by your approach in Senate Bill 6 as having touched on almost all of those fundamental principles, and believe that it'll be a significant step forward as you strive to create excellent opportunities for students to succeed throughout their life as proficient readers. And so we would urge you to support SB 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galbraith. I appreciate your comments. Roy Getchell to be followed by Lynette Sullivan. Mr. Getchell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Roy Getchell, and I'm the proud superintendent of the Haynesboro School District. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My undergraduate degree is in elementary education in the area of remedial reading, and my PhD is in educational leadership and policy studies from the University of Denver. I've successfully implemented the Colorado Basic Literacy Act, which started in 1997, and the Colorado READ Act as a teacher and/or principal for many years. I share that with you, but I want you to know that my lifelong dream has been to be an Alaskan, and that came true in 2018. As a brand new teacher, fresh out of college in 1991, I attempted to move here, but met over 3,000 other candidates at the ATP job fair in Anchorage. It's amazing how that's changed. Needless to say, I had a long flight home, and it took me a while to get here today. What a privilege it is to live in Alaska, a place whose educational soul isn't for sale. Students here can still do things. They're capable, and they represent the best of their generation. For that reason, with confidence, I moved my 2 daughters here. My oldest is a junior in high school. It's hardly the ideal time to move, but I'll be the first to tell you that it's been the best thing we could have done. I say that to assure you that Alaska schools are not broken. I appreciate the components of SB 6. I appreciate the work to look at early literacy and early years education and the efforts put forth with that. I'm concerned that there are different parts of this that would require other tools and screeners, for example, that would allow or that would require districts to change already working processes. Like for us, we use Dibbles and Lindamood Bell. Having to change that could be a problem, and I'd like to be able to talk more about that. I also appreciate the fact and was a bit concerned that you've changed the word phonic awareness to phonemic awareness. A reading teacher would have looked at that immediately and noticed that there were some concerns with that. That gives me pause in realizing that maybe a lot of Alaska's educators didn't have a chance to look at this before it was put out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Getchell. I appreciate your coming to a conclusion. I'm sorry to have to rush you, but we're short of time.
You betcha. I just would also encourage other folks to look at Board Policy 5123 in all of our districts, which currently allows mandatory retention or allows retention in school districts from their administration. So I think we can remove that from the bill. I appreciate all of your support, the focus on reading, and all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Getchell. Welcome to Alaska. Pleased to have you here. Moving on to Lynette Sullivan, to be followed by Trevor Storrs. Lynette? Lynette is offline. We'll come back to you if you come back. Moving on to Trevor Storrs, to be followed by Malin Paquette. Trevor. Trevor Storrs?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Please identify yourself for the record. Trevor, glad to have you with us.
Great. Good morning. For the record, I'm Trevor Storrs, President and CEO of the Alaska Children's Trust. And thanks for this opportunity to testify on SB 6. And thank you to Senator Begich and Governor Dunleavy for their leadership and dedication to our children and families. As the statewide leader in the prevention of child abuse and neglect, we're in support of SB 6 at this time. Early childhood education has been shown to reduce several of the risk factors that put children at risk of experiencing child abuse and neglect. My testimony today is not focused on the language in the bill, but on the intent. The goal of this bill is to invest early and ensure our children are ready to be contributing members to the collective success of our state. We commend this bill for recognizing that investing early provides the best return on investment. However, it will be equally important to remember that children need to arrive at school ready to learn. No matter how good the reading program is, if a child arrives hungry, who is homeless, can't access good health care, or has trauma in their life, their ability to learn is greatly hindered. As this bill moves forward, it will be important to remember the role a social determinant has on the child's ability to learn. Other states that have seen an increase in third grade reading went beyond just ensuring the right reading program or pre-K program was instituted. These states also ensured these children's families and themselves had the support to reduce the many barriers that cause them not to learn. We encourage the legislature, as you move this bill forward, and they're not just looking at this bill, but other decisions related to the budget and how we invest, that if we invest here but cut Medicaid, cut food stamps, cut housing and homelessness, the success of this bill and the investment you're making is greatly reduced. Thank you for this opportunity to testify and open to any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Storrs. Appreciate your thoughts. Moving on to Malin Paquette, followed by David Boyle. Malin?
Yes, thank you to the committee and to those that are serving our youth in schools throughout the state of Alaska. My name is Malin Paquette. I am a lifelong Alaskan. I am one of your K-12 work products, high school diploma, 1996, immediate entry into undergraduate in psychology, prompt graduation, 2000, continued pursuing higher education outside state, and returned with a Master of Arts in Forensic Psychology. So I strongly want to caution folks when we're looking at gathering information. I appreciate, though, the teachers and the educators and program leaders coming forward to give testimony today. Several declared that the campuses are not prepared with the educators needed. Some testimony declares that there's concern where the money for implementation will come from. I have some macro concepts for resolve. Number one, delaying access to education is not the answer. I strongly believe that I've come to where I'm at today by being read as an infant. And I would like you to consider who you should hear from, such as Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education, with a statutory obligation to provide recommendations to the Alaska legislature. Perhaps that information is forthcoming. their work product is insufficient at this time. Current executive has been in place serving our educational needs since 1999, should be well aware of the educational shortage and the critical infrastructure shortage, yet her recommendations are mute. Their board includes post-term Dr. Kenneth Hamilton. Maybe you could invite him.
Excuse me, Milan, I really need to ask you to speak to the bill in front of us, SB 6, if you would, please.
Yes, SB 6, delaying access to education is not the answer for children, and it would be really beneficial to the legislature to hold ACPE accountable for their failure to provide recommendations over time and to this day.
Thank you, Milan. I appreciate your comments. Moving on to David Boyle, to be followed by Bethany Markham. Mr. Boyle.
Chairman Stevens, committee members, I'm David Boyle. I'm testifying for myself. There's probably no more important bill this session than SB 6, which, if properly implemented with accountability metrics, will impact future Alaskans, our children. I support SB 6 if retention requirements are included. We've all seen the data on how poorly Alaska students perform on national tests, and that picture is not very pretty. We need to stop this blame game. Parents, kids, teachers, administrators. Surely we can all agree that every child should read at grade level. Question is, how do we accomplish that? SB 6 is a start, but it's only a start if implemented with accountability. Now let's talk about retention of students. You need some teeth in this legislation for it to be truly effective. To pass a reading bill without retention would be like passing a DUI bill with no consequences to the violator, with possible future dire consequences. Now I'd like to compare those states that have strong retention requirements in their reading bill and those with weak retention requirements. The data clearly show the positive effects of retaining students in third grade who are far below grade level in reading. There are 18 states that have implemented the Florida reading model since 2015. 8 of those states have strong retention requirements, and 10 of them have weak retention requirements. Of the 10 states with weak retention requirements, only 4 increased in their NAEP scores for free and reduced price lunches, and 2 actually saw their scores decrease. The bottom line is the NAEP score growth is 6 times higher for those states with strong retention bills. We can ignore the data and pass a feel-good bill which continues to fail our children. Or we can help teachers, parents, and children ensure that all our kids can read at grade level so they can be successful in later grades and in life. I don't believe there's anyone in this building who wants an Alaska child to not be able to read well. Parents, teachers, all Alaskans want every child to succeed, so every child must be able to read at grade level. I want to quote from the Alaska Association of School Boards testimony on this bill. Quote, "It seems to me that retaining a child for lack of reading proficiency may be more of a failure of the system, rather than the fault of the child," end quote. So let's not fail the child again by not including retention requirements. Finally, if we want our public schools to improve, every child must have a teacher who can teach kids how to read. And we must help parents also help their kids to read. By not doing so, we fail these kids and take their futures from them. And we contribute also to the so-called income inequality problem this nation is facing today. Remember, this is about the kids, and it's not about the system. Thank you for the opportunity, and good luck on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Appreciate your thoughts. Bethany Markham, to be followed by Barbara Gerard.
Chairman Stevens and members of the committee. My name is Bethany Markham with Alaska Policy Forum. Robust early childhood literacy programs are a proven solution to Alaska's last in the country scores. These programs have resulted in momentous and relatively rapid gains for children in some of the states which have implemented the programs, but not in all of the states. In some states, the results have been flat. So what's the difference? The difference is accountability. In some states, such as Colorado and Connecticut, the programs do contain all of the right interventions. For example, early and continuous parental notification of struggling readers, pairing the weakest readers with the most highly effective teachers, instruction and phonological awareness, etc. And in those states, if the interventions do not bring a child up to proficiency, often the child gets passed along through the remaining grade levels anyway. And data shows that while some of these children will eventually catch up, many will not. And those are the children who are most likely to drop out of school, in fact, at a 4 times greater rate, end up in poverty, and land in our correctional system. But in some of the states with early childhood literacy programs, they have included an important accountability measure, performance-based promotion. Again, these state programs have all the same interventions, but in the end, if the child is not at grade level proficiency, the child gets a different year of third grade, not just another year of third grade. The repeated third grade includes targeted, focused attention, which is precisely what these children deserve. In Mississippi, for example, they increased the number of students with disabilities who passed the literacy test by 23%. As you consider these reforms, I would just remind you that there can be no better return on our investment than making a difference in the lives of Alaska's children. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your comments. We'll move on to our next speaker, Barbara Gerard, to be followed by Patrick Mayer. I apologize, the time issue here. We're going to have to end with Mr. Mayer, but I do want to thank those of you who have signed up. We're not going to get to you today. David Crystal, principal of the Anchorage School District in Anchorage. Lori Pickett, the president of the International Dyslexia Association in Anchorage. In addition, a couple people have dropped off partly because of time. Celeste Hody Groden from Grouden? Celeste Hodge Grouden. Apologize for making a mess of your name. And Lynette Sullivan. So I do apologize we can't get to everyone, but let's go on to Barbara, to be followed by Patrick, and he will be our last speaker. Barbara Gerard.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Gerard, last name Gerard, Gerard. I am the proud principal of Academy Charter School in Palmer, Alaska. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I am excited about this bill and the movement to improve literacy across the state of Alaska. I am supportive of the recommendation to change entering kindergarten from September 1 to June 1st. 3 years ago, Academy's governing board developed a policy change for our kindergarten entry date, moving from September 1 to August 1st. During the 3 years following this change, we have found more of our kindergarten students are entering school ready to learn. Turning 5 a few months prior to entering kindergarten allows children to have met more of the developmental milestones necessary to meet expectations, the expectations of academics, more emotionally ready and socially ready to enter kindergarten and school in general. Research supports early intervention and early learning. I am in support of implementing public preschool for all Alaskan children. Children who have attended preschool have an edge when entering kindergarten. They have a basic understanding of what is expected in the classroom. They've already learned some collaboration skills. They've been exposed to rich language and vocabulary, phonemic awareness, and they are already developing the love of reading.
Thank you, Barbara, and if you could conclude, please.
Okay, yes. So preschool does give children an advantage. I know it's a costly part, but the positive outcomes of preschool for all Alaskan children would reap not only early benefits, but long-term benefits. It's well worth the investment of front-load education. That's where we need to do it. We need kids on the trajectory of reading proficiency from the beginning. There would be less need to retain children due to lack of reading proficiency in second and third grade because they would learn to read and love to read early. Please consider implementation of public preschools in all public schools and allow pre-elementary students to be counted in the school's average daily membership. I know we would do that at Academy Charter School. It would make us even better than we already are. Thank you for your exciting efforts in this movement of literacy across Alaska. I'm in full support. I offer my time, my knowledge, and my expertise to help support the passage of Senate Bill 6. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, Barbara. We will end with, unfortunately, with Patrick Mayer, but Superintendent Mayer, of course, I'm glad that we are able to get to you. I just remind folks that though I'll be closing public testimony, we'll be keeping this open to written testimony, and that can be submitted at any time. Superintendent Mayer, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Senator Stevens and members of the committee, and thank you for allowing me to testify this morning. For the record, my name is Patrick Mayer, Superintendent of the Aleutians Eastboro School District and past President of the Alaska Superintendents Association, and most importantly, a student advocate. Thank you, Senator Begich, for introducing this legislation, and especially the universal preschool sections of the bill that are according to the 2019 Alaska Developmental Profile, nearly 70% of Alaska students enter kindergarten lacking foundational preparation for learning. ASA believes equitable access to fully funded, sustainable 0 to 5 and pre-K learning programs provides a foundation of excellent social, emotional, and cognitive instruction to students. Research clearly demonstrates that early intervention and instruction is the best way to increase student achievement across all demographics and create the greatest opportunity for all students to read proficiently by 3rd grade. I fully support that early childhood education should be part of public school funding through the base student allocation. Students in Alaska must learn to read and deserve no less from us. I support early assessment of reading proficiency, research-based interventions for less than proficient readers, and high-quality professional development to enable educators to create proficient readers. Superintendents, however, did not have an opportunity to provide input on this bill. There was an overarching general solicitation that I responded to as president, asking for the draft of the bill for meaningful input to be provided when I was president. This did not happen. We may not reach a consensus for the bill, but a real opportunity to hear from a broad base of superintendents, principals, and teachers will certainly help shape it to provide the best outcome for students. So I encourage you to take time to actually solicit input from educators in the field who will be asked to implement anything that is passed. As written, the bill is overly prescriptive with regard to details for districts to implement. It seems as if providing high-quality professional development to educators and paraprofessionals in reading instruction and intervention and then holding them accountable would be a better approach. Retention should not be a strategy in this bill. Why would we support something that we know unequivocally hurts kids? I've heard a lot of concern across the state about the capacity of the Department of Education to implement this bill, especially given the ambitious timeline. Please consider this in your deliberations. I ask for careful consideration of the legislation to ensure it is the very best we can provide for our students. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I thank all of those who have called in to testify, and I apologize to those we could not get to today, but remind you that the written record will be open and encourage you to send written testimony to us. So at this time, I'm going to close public testimony on Senate Bill 6, set it aside for further review. Repeat, however, that the written testimony can be submitted at any time by writing senate.education@aklag.gov. We'll be taking up the CS for Senate Bill 6 tomorrow morning, including an updated sectional and possibly any amendments the members may wish to propose. Any further comments from members of the committee? Thank you all for being here. We are adjourned.